So I wanted to discuss one of Og's recent posts, which happened today. This one here. So I'm just going to read it out loud, give a little bit of thoughts, and invite everybody to discuss the ideas. Planet Helion, it is time you understand. Human souls are uploaded into a mainframe. This mainframe is designed to convert human soul energy into a different kind of fuel. Those who are called Draco utilize this system to extract the life force energy from the human soul as a type of piezoelectric scalar quantum force that enables a temporal network stable field that is then used by the native species as its reality field matrix. In other words, there is no time. It doesn't exist. In order to have time, someone has to spend a long time in some form of disassociation, extended state, projection, etc. Extreme pain, fear, lostness, forgetfulness, callous, and etc. are ways of dropping the soul frequency down into a localized gravity well, which then acts as a ticking second hand for a quantum temporal network, which is then utilized for the native species consciousness grid as their calendar map. Each soul that is impressed into this field has its version of time and space entirely rewritten from a quantum level inside its temporal quantum architecture. It's a Q computer, M Soul Grid 1. When this happens, it can't be undone. The DNA is essentially written to rewrite every experience, perception, memory, interaction, and consciousness dynamic as a form of torture, through which the maximum level of pain and desolation is generated against a temporal backbone of the least amount of time possible. The end result is a field someone walks through that takes a few minutes to smell the flowers becomes the experience of being dragged through a burning forest while the skin of the contact points burn off without actually harming the nerve endings, just perceptual capsaicin, soul pain, and without actually changing from one scene to the next. The entire experience, life, is then down converted from the perspective of that soul into one large experience of being dragged through something painful, without the possibility of unconsciousness, and without the possibility of changing any single parameter of the scene, without exponentially maximizing the pain extraction. You get up and run through the forest, all of your limbs burst into flames, and now the skin that will not die and still feels becomes a stretched out carcass that becomes the pain perception of the entire diameter of the forest, essentially re-releasing all of the pain of the entire experience previously into one exponential burst that usually results in the soul submitting from its attempt to flee and resting back down into the ultra low state of absolute abject horror and desolation. This goes on for the entire course of human history, as long as the Earth realm ticks and we are ignorant of quantum space interactions. This will be present, connected and beaming the souls through the diffraction field around Saturn until the end of time. Ultimately, there is no escape, and most of the children that were experimented on were sent to this place. A series of relays and transmitters were set up to shield the Earth reality of these kinds of realms. They are layered in a series of temporal phasing fields surrounding the planetary consciousness grid. Essentially, when a soul is overdrawn, the crystalline matrix that holds the information together in time and space like a nuclear force shatters. This becomes the background radiation of the consciousness fields in the universe, like EM fields of a different order. When breaking through the consciousness limitation frequency barrier, these are the kinds of realms that were experienced, and you can guess what kinds of discoveries and interactions this led to. This is a small discussion of the memory and a small fraction of the overall memory. The soul energy is embedded into the atmosphere of this cybernetic chaos-based holographic environment, piggybacking off of the frequencies and soul emissions, mind fields of the Earth reality. Essentially, this reality is a slave drive to the master drive that is actually a modulation system used as an auxiliary in order to power its interdimensional space-based terraforming system. They modulate the surrounding area of the time-space map to suit their environmental needs, which is pure suffering 100% of the time. Be aware, if you are afraid, you are mistaken. This is an intelligent process. Fear is just another aspect of the system used to electromagnetically contain the perceptual system of the soul through a virtual construct that the soul is contained within intelligently and subliminally, and metaphysically as plasma. That system then powers a system-wide gear network, which then rotates 1 second moment unit of subtime each time a soul is shattered and consumed. Ultimately, their atmosphere is a sea of human souls, often children, broken down into their subcomponents, inserted into torture realities, drawn into abject horror and despair, which then functions to power the enormous gears of time, ever, so slowly, where these beings then hybridize themselves through genetic engineering and run around pretending they're elite humans that get to live for a strict real-time perceptual unit of thousands of years. This is yet still one of the nicer aspects of what happens here. The beings involved do their best to ensure the suffering is swift and complete and not meaningless. There are more horrific stories of what happens here on this planet in a kind of slow motion exchange of soul energy. Maybe if we all agreed to grow the strongest ever here, we would send a shockwave to the doomed planet and free the lost souls by overloading their system. Or we could sit here and bitch at one another forever, and somewhere around the 0.009% we'll avoid that reality, or something similar. Reread if you didn't see it. So we're going to have a meeting with ourselves. In other words, me and the kitten. Give a little bit of contrast to the comment content. If you guys still listen to Matt, Quantum of Conscious or consciousness? I don't remember. I think it's consciousness. And he comes at it from the perspective of, I don't know anything, I just observe trends and something's clearly going on. So, his ultimate sort of conclusion was that the ones running this place, their goal is to lower the collective consciousness to a suitable level for whatever they're aiming for. And logically speaking, if somebody's going to assert such a thing, there needs to be some sort of reasoning why these beings would want to do that. Why would beings want to lower the frequency of somebody? And if you think of it in terms of business, right? Business is the thing where your movements, your action and movements are determined by the idea of creating more of something, right? In our physical reality, that's represented by money. However, this reality is, I'm sure, one of many, 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 or it's just one reality with many facets, each of which could be considered its own universe, or each soul spark node could be considered its own universe. And the idea of harvesting something, right, for its energy or its loosh, such as animals, we do that with animals, and we attempt to minimize suffering for the most part, but we don't consider the fact that that the animal's entire life has been demoted to just being a unit that can be farmed, right? So there's an empathetic disconnect when beings are looked at in terms of possible profit or making more of a thing which we like, than in terms of empathy, in which you put yourself, you can feel yourself into the perspective of that being, and then you decide, should I take this action? Would I like that feeling? This thing that I'm doing to the other being, would I like that feeling if tables were turned and it was being done to me? That's Jesus' core message. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So when you consider into the mind of these beings that would farm humans in this manner, you see that there is a necessary lack of empathetic guidance. Necessary lack of empathetic guidance. Because very likely, if they thought themselves or felt themselves into the possibility of having an entire reality created for them in which they're burned alive for a certain period of time, where there's no escape, and yes, it's perceptual and not so-called real according to the idea of you being in a simulation and experiencing pain, it's still suffering. So one being suffering, so another being can gain or personally profit from that suffering. So there's a necessary lack of empathetic guidance. Now, likely, these beings they either don't see the full rebound effect of what they're doing, like the video I posted earlier today is very fitting along with this discussion, because I was talking to the politicians and whatnot that are helping this current shit show on our world stage continue itself. But that idea can be extrapolated out to many other things, just like the golden rule can. And you can see that these beings have some sort of empathetic disconnect, and they don't necessarily see what it is that is represented by the idea of karma and justice and getting your own reward for the things that you plant in the universe, whether it's thoughts or actions. And very likely, if these beings did eventually find a nice little yellow cube or some sort of prediction tech, they would see that very likely if they created a hell realm for human souls in order to power their realm, that making a video. I'm making a video. You're back so fast.
I know, I decided to come water the garden before I go out there, because otherwise it's going to be dark when I get back.
Okay. was my thought?
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, that, yeah, basically they don't see the full repercussions. And when they do, when they see into that and feel into that, they're going to try to evade it. And that's, all of those actions are just going to compel them into their own hell that they created by using other people for personal gain. That's my thoughts on it. This sort of information isn't for everybody. It's probably for very few people, but those of you that understand will get it. So feel free to comment on what you feel about that idea. And if you have any personal experience of similar sorts of things, like even a bad trip where your thoughts manifest hell realities and you come out of it, that sort of thing could still be in a similar vein, where if you're producing low frequency torture energy, even in a dream state, it can very likely be harvested, because all of this is a dream state anyway, top to bottom. Just various levels of realness, perceived realness. Okay, that's it. Let me know what you think. Peace, love, and happiness.
Bad.
No, you're fine.